Alright, advanced math, last statistics lesson. And this is a thinking one. We're not going to do a lot of calculating today. Today's really learning to think like a statistician or to analyze data like a statistician. We've done a lot of calculating and a lot of how to, make different sorts of representations of data. We've talked about how to make histograms and box plots and line plots and scatter plots and how to read those. But I kind of want to put it all together today and really learn how to think about those. People who collect statistics, statisticians, they do it for a reason. They do it to learn things about groups of people or groups of things. And so I want to just spend our last day kind of thinking like a statistician would think. So let's look at this. So this is a data collected on time to complete a certain assignment. And we measured how long it took some 6th graders to complete that assignment and how long it took some 7th graders to complete that same assignment. All right, so this is the kind of question a statistician would collect this data because they want to know, what's the difference, or is there a difference? Is there anything I can learn about 6th and 7th graders from this information? We don't just do it so that we can make a graph and so that we can calculate means, medians, modes, and ranges. We do it because we want to think and learn and look for patterns. So here are some kind of questions you might be asked that ask you to do that kind of thing, but it's really just all about thinking. So one thing would be to describe the data distribution of times for the 6th and the 7th graders. So that's just looking at it and kind of saying, well, how are they distributed? So we don't have to be real technical here and do a lot of calculating to look at this and say, well, all the 7th graders were between 50 and 60, and all the 6th graders were between 40 and 60. So just quick observations I can make about 6th and 7th graders here is these are more spread out, and these are less spread out. That's just it's obvious, but that's the kind of thing you really want to know when you ask these questions. Well, there's a bigger spread on these 6th graders than there are on these 7th graders. But the other thing about it is, describing the data distribution, be sure to comment on center, spread, and shape. So I kind of talked about spread already. Spread means range, really. And so this has a bigger range, and this has a smaller range. There's only a range of 10 here, and there's a range of 20 here. Or not quite 20, 19, I guess. And so that's a big thing to know, right? That 6th graders, if I was going to give this assignment, I might have to wait. I might have to plan all the way from 40 to 60 minutes for 6th graders to do it, but only from 50 to 60 minutes for 7th graders to do it. So center, when you're looking for center, that's literally the median. And we just kind of want to know, where's the middle? Because that's a lot of times what statisticians are interested in, is sort of middle. So I'm not going to count the exact one, but I'm going to guess probably the middle 6th grader was that one. Pretty close if I'm not exactly right. Could have been one of those. But the middle 7th grader is probably one of these, I'm going to guess. Right? So the center of the data is much higher for the 7th graders. The middle 7th grader took 55 minutes, and the middle 6th grader took 48 minutes. So the middle is much higher here. I would guess in general that it's just taking 7th graders longer because the middle is so much higher. On average, not every single one. Obviously, these two 6th graders took longer than these two 7th graders. But in general, the middle 7th grader took longer than the middle 6th grader. Shape is sort of even more general. When I look at this and I want to think about the shape, I don't see any real pattern in either of these. It's kind of what shape means. Is it's not like tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of them took in here, and I might have a peak, a tall peak. It's really, when I look at this, there's pretty much an even distribution across the range here. And really on both of them there is. You know, when I look at this, a lot are down here and a lot are up here, and it's really pretty even. 1 or 2 or 3 took every different, actually on this one just 1 or 2, every different time. And over here, 1 or 2 or 3 took every different time. It's not like I have a big, tall stack anywhere. It's really like they took between 50 and 60 minutes pretty evenly. And they took between 40 and 59 minutes pretty evenly. So that's the shape. The shape is pretty even and spread out. That's the best I can describe it. It's not a lot of technical terms. You know, it's really just like using your judgment to describe it. 2 we kind of talked about. Are they centered in the same place? No, not even close. We estimated that this one was centered about here, and this one was centered about here. You know, I'd really want you to count and find the actual median, but the centers, you know, this kind of thing, I would say, no, they're not centered. The center is definitely greater on the 7th grade. And we talked spread too. Much bigger spread here. Spread means range. Big spread, small spread, and that tells me a lot. If I teach 7th grade, I can expect a much smaller spread of times that they're going to take to finish this assignment. All right. And the last thing, were 6th or 7th graders more consistent in their times? Well, I would say the 7th graders were much more consistent because first I took all those 7th graders and they're only spread out among 10 minutes. So there's lots of 2s and 3s here, whereas it's lots of 1s and 2s here. You know, they were more spread out, less consistent in 6th grade. A much tighter group in 7th grade. And so that's the kinds of things that statisticians wonder. They really want to ask questions here about the people, not about the numbers. That's really the main thing. Like, how can the numbers tell me about the people? What can this data tell me about how 7th graders are different from 6th graders on this assignment? All right, let's do another one. Open your math notebook. And let's do this one. If you want to take a minute to draw the diagrams, you can do that. And so this is a number of text messages data. So what a statistician might wonder is, do the number of text messages that girls send and boys send in a certain amount of time, I don't know what the amount of time is. Let's just say it's a week. Can I learn anything about the differences in boys and girls and how they send text messages from this data? That's why a statistician would ask. They wouldn't just make a graph because they felt like making a graph. All right, so let's talk about some questions that help us think about this like a statistician would think about it. All right, so first thing, we're going to describe it. A lot of times we'd be asked to describe the data in terms of center, spread, and shape. Now, being super literal, center means median, that's the middle, and spread means range. So let's comment on those. So, the girls here, looks like the center of the data is probably in here somewhere. I'm going to guess, looks like there were about 8, 30, 38, another maybe 32, let's call it 70, 95. Let's see, looks like there was around 100 girls here. So I want to see about where the 50th one is. So this was 8, 38, yeah. The 50th girl is going to be in here somewhere. So the center is one of these girls that sent between 95 and 105 text messages. So let's just say the middle girl is about 100. And then over here, see, I bet there's also 100 boys, but more spread out. So let's say there's, 2, 7, about 25, 40. So I'm going to say the 100th boy is somewhere in here. We're going to say there's also 100 boys. And so the 100th boy is somewhere in this 75 to 85 group. So we'll say it's about an 80. So the center is quite a bit different on these two. The middle girl sent 100. The middle boy sent 80, which means, half of boys sent less than 80, half sent more. Half of girls sent less than 100, half sent more. So that's a talk about their center. Spread is how spread out they are. That's range. The girls were not very spread out. Their range only goes from 75 to 125. 75 to 125. So they had a range of 50 texts. The boys were way spread out. Whoop, time for lunch. So I'm going to go back to where I am. Here we go. The boys were spread all the way out from possibly 25 to 155. So they had a range of, goodness, what is that, 150, of 130 texts. The boys were much more spread out. All the girls were right in this little range right here. The boys were all over the place. Some of them sent very few, some of them sent a ton. And so shape, they both, histograms, you can kind of look at a pattern. They're both shaped kind of like this. They're lower, and then they get higher, and then they get lower again. Lower, higher, lower. So we would say that, they both have a big cluster near the center. We might call this top a peak a lot of the time. They both have a peak near their center. They both, this one has, these are, where there's none or like a really lower number, you might call that a trough. Peaks and troughs. But mostly they're both kind of centered around their middle. And that's kind of how I describe them. They start lower, they increase to their center, and then they decrease after that. Increase to the center, decrease after that. So, that means whatever that middle part is, that's pretty much most of the people, like most of the girls are here, pretty close to that middle, and most of the boys are here. Pretty close to that middle. So they're pretty clustered around the center. Sometimes we also call that bell-shaped. It looks kind of like a bell. All right, so let's see. So now, these we've kind of talked about. Are they centered around the same place? No. The girls were centered around 100, and the boys were centered around 80. So the girls had a much greater center. Spread, we already talked about too. Boys had a much greater spread. That's a thing, statisticians are interested in, how spread out things are. And then on average, did the boys or the girls send more text messages? Now this, you'll notice that there's a word there, average, which makes it seem like we need to calculate this, right? Sometimes you can tell from looking at this which is going to have a higher average. These I am not sure. This one I would say, I bet the average is pretty close to 100 because you don't go very far either way, and there's about the same number below as above. The boys have a weirder, what I worry about with the boys are that these outliers may skew the data. I'm not sure the average is going to be really close to 80. It might be, I said 800 down here, sorry. The average might be around 80, but these are so spread out that you may need to do some calculating. So, you may need to do, we're not going to do it because it's got 100 numbers in here, but you may need to calculate, 30 plus 30 for those plus 5 50s, 5 times 50 plus, 16 times 60, and then do your division by 100. I don't know. I'm going to guess that the girls have a higher average because I think this low one would cancel out this high one. This low one would cancel out this high one. But I can't be certain. But if I had to guess, that's what it is. So that is how you think like a statistician. You think about the people and what you can learn about them and not the numbers. See you tomorrow.